jail, where he remained for 4 days and was charged with multiple counts of aggravated battery. However, on December 18th, 2020, all charges against Mr. Kennedy were dismissed. On February 17th, 2021, Mr. Kennedy filed a civil rights lawsuit against Officer Ridgner, Officer Abramson, and the city of Chicago. And on June 10th, 2022, Mr. Kennedy agreed to dismiss the suit in exchange for a $195,000 settlement. The Chicago Civilian Office of Police Accountability, or COPA, investigated the encounter and determined that Officer Ridgner and Officer Abramson detained Mr. Kennedy without justification, arrested Mr. Kennedy without justification, made false, misleading, incomplete, and/or inaccurate statements when completing reports related to the encounter, and failed to properly activate their body-worn cameras. The investigation also found that Officer Ridgner grabbed Mr. Kennedy by the throat and took him to the ground without justification, and that Officer Abramson stated words to the effect of, quote, "I'm going to catch a body today," and failed to report the excessive force used by Officer Ridgner against Mr. Kennedy. As discipline, the Chief Administrator of the Office of Police Accountability recommended that Officer Ridgner and Officer Abramson be terminated from the department. The Chief Administrator also recommended that Supervisors Lieutenant Kevin Keith and Sergeant Nicholas Irvin be terminated for making or approving one or more false, misleading, incomplete, and/or inaccurate statements when approving the tactical response reports completed by Officer Ridgner and Officer Abramson. Under the Chicago PD disciplinary process, a termination complaint must be filed and decided by the Chicago Police Board before an officer can be fired. And as of the date of writing this episode, the board has not released a decision relating to the termination of Officer Ridgner, Officer Abramson, Lieutenant Keith, or Sergeant Irvin. However, Officer Ridgner's LinkedIn page shows his employment at the Chicago PD ended in July of 2024, and that he is currently employed as a police officer in the village of Broadview, Illinois. Overall, the Chicago officers get an F for forcefully detaining Mr. Kennedy without any legitimate justification for doing so, employing a level of force that would have been excessive even if they had a reason to seize him, and maintaining hostile and confrontational demeanors throughout the encounter with both Mr. Kennedy and the witnesses that gathered to protest his arrest. The lack of leadership and professionalism displayed by all of the officers involved in this encounter was truly astounding, and rather than attempting to control and de-escalate the situation with the witnesses, the officers argued with them and actually escalated the chaos, with Officer Abramson in particular egging on the crowd, seemingly threatening them with lethal force and repeatedly directing profanity at the angry citizens. This level of unprofessionalism is entirely unacceptable in a police officer at any level, and in this encounter, it is clear that the officer's response to the bystanders further damaged an already strained police-community relationship. Mr. Kennedy gets an A, because although he did appear to step away from the officers as they ran towards him, this is understandable given the fact that he was being quickly and forcibly detained for no apparent reason. And Mr. Kennedy took appropriate and effective action after the encounter to seek accountability for the constitutional violations the officers subjected him to. While it is unclear whether Mr. Kennedy himself filed a complaint against the officers, an investigation was conducted, with termination of the officers involved being recommended, and Mr. Kennedy